Okay, so a new farm bill is set to pass in September. They've got to rewrite the farm bill by 2018, and a lot of people are going around saying, they're going to put an end to Delta 8, they're going to ban THCA, all this stuff. I'm going to let you know what I think is going to happen. Now, you have to realize most of this farm bill is dealing with food stamps or SNAP benefits. That's the majority of this farm bill. The hemp part is a small part of it. So on top of everything that Republicans and Democrats are going to disagree over, the hemp thing is pretty small. Second of all, these loopholes, the Delta 8 loophole, the THCA loophole, all these things, people think they're going to shut it down. And originally that was my belief, because I thought, these big cannabis companies that are paying millions of dollars for permits and the rights to sell these products are going to be pissed that little hemp companies are basically cutting into their market share. And so they're gonna pay their lobbyists to shut it down. I've changed my view on that for a number of reasons. One of which is I've seen the big cannabis companies essentially releasing their hemp line. A company like Stizzy, which is one of the main, it's actually the biggest cannabis company in California, has now released a hemp line where they have all their Delta 8 and THCa and whatever products that they can now sell in North Carolina and Tennessee and any other state. So for them, rather than pay a lobbyist money to hopefully shut down some loophole, they've decided instead, hey, let's just play this game. And you know what? We'll play it better than these little guys because we know distribution, we've got the branding, and we'll take this whole market. We don't care. And so, I've seen companies like Cookies and, sorry, must have swallowed a bug. We've seen some of these bigger cannabis companies kind of jumping into this Delta 8 THCA space. And I think they're perfectly happy with that. The second reason is that, for them to have to pay lobbyists to then hopefully change the law to then make it more restrictive is one thing, okay? That's expensive, and it's honestly not a surefire thing. The amount of money they can throw at a lobbyist pales in comparison to what some of these other lobbyists, what that same lobbyist is getting paid from the pharmaceutical industry or the military industrial complex or whatever. So really, it's peanuts. Even though we're talking millions of dollars, it's kind of peanuts in the grand scheme of things. The second thing is, even if they do change the legislation, they also now have to convince law enforcement to enforce these new laws. So everybody's saying, well, the FDA is going to regulate CBD. Okay, maybe. Personally, I think the FDA is more concerned with vaccines than they are, regulating the CBD industry, which is a big industry. It's a messy industry, and I honestly don't think they really care. So that's one thing. But let's say they do regulate it. They do put in some regulations, and let's say they even ban these novel cannabinoids like Delta 8, Delta 10, and maybe set a limit on, THCA. Okay, fine. Now they have to convince the law enforcement across the country to crack down on people who are in violation of that legislation. And I think that is a much tougher thing than most people realize. Now, if this was the 90s, it'd be a different story. If we were in the 90s, it wouldn't even have made it this far. We wouldn't have Delta 8. This stuff would have been shut down much earlier. But the trend is not towards prohibition. Prohibition has not worked. Most people see that it doesn't work. And also, prohibition upon something that is popular amongst the general population is not a popular position to get behind. So none of these politicians want to attach themselves to being, against cannabis. And as far as the state looks at it, most states look at it, whatever. Okay, we don't really care. Even though these smoke shops and these little gas stations and stuff are selling these products, we're still getting taxes. And maybe we're not getting the 45% that Chicago's getting, but we're still pretty happy that we're just getting tax revenue. Convincing the local police departments to put their resources, their limited resources, into now going into mom and pop pot shops and shutting them down is, the police don't want to do it. I mean, I really don't think they want to deal with this because it's legal in most states. It's medical in most states, and they have bigger problems. I mean, every city out there has got a fentanyl epidemic going on right now. It's a zombie apocalypse in some of these cities, even Asheville. It's bad. And it's not a judgment on these people. Like, they're suffering. They're going through it. That's what everybody should realize when they encounter somebody who's suffering from addiction. It's not just that they want to go get messed up. They're afflicted. and they're fighting a spiritual battle, and that's the reality of it. And, you know, something like cannabis, although it's a drug, might actually help people transition from much harder drugs to something that, you know, allows them to function and is far less harmful to their body than, you know, something like heroin or methamphetamines. So I don't think most cops want to shut this down. I don't think most legislators really care. I think they're so divided, and they have a hard enough time agreeing on, just say, you know, food stamp benefits, that they really don't want to touch this thing. And I just don't think they care. Last thing I'm going to say is I think they're kind of at the point, the powers that be, let's say, are at the point where they're just sort of like, let them get high. Like, let them get high. We've got scandal after scandal breaking. We're trying to distract them with aliens and all these other stories. Just let them get high. The last thing we want is people to be outraged because we took their Delta-8 gummies away. And I honestly think that's where things are. Maybe it's the modern day version of let them eat cake. Just let them get high. Who cares? We're still getting tax revenue, and it keeps them complacent. So, you know, who cares about that? Anyway, that's my opinion. I could be totally off. They could come down with some really harsh legislation in September and then ban it all. And then all, you know, the only thing you can find is CBD. Honestly, I think the cat's out of the bag. I think most of these shops will continue selling these products until like law enforcement goes in and shuts them down. And I think most of it will continue to move through the internet. I think it's just like shutting it down at this point is not really feasible. And so I don't really see that happening. I see the industry kind of continuing as it is, and sort of cat's out of the bag thing. And I could be wrong, but, you know, I'm basically, you know, my business either thrives or dies based on the predictions I make. And so I have to look, where do I see this in 3 months? Where do I see this in 6 months? Where do I see this in a year? And that's what I'm seeing. That's my bet. That's where I'm placing my chips. Hey, if the legislation changes and they start cracking down on this and that, then whatever. We'll go back to just selling CBD, oil and salve, and that's great because it helps a lot of people. But I can tell you that the majority of the cannabis industry is focused on people who want to get high. That's just the reality of it. And so anyway, I hope you guys found this informative. Like, subscribe, and hopefully we'll have some more videos for you really soon. Peace.